Hi, guys. Peter Burke here, WPTV executive producer, digital executive producer, and I'm here today talking horror films. We've got Michelle Casada joining us. She's a horror aficionado like myself,
Huge
and
Halloween fan.
yeah, so we thought she'd be a great addition to this conversation. I myself happen to be a big Halloween horror kind of guy, and 'tis the season, so we wanted to, just have a conversation about some of the greatest horror flicks out there. I'm also joined by Mark Gretschmill. Um, he's an LA-based film critic, and he's done. You may have read some of his write-ups and reviews on WPTV.com. So thanks, guys, for joining us. Appreciate it.
Tis the season.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
So yeah, I just wanted to I wanted to start, and I posted, for those of you who are loyal WPTV.com readers, you may have seen two articles that I posted for your viewing entertainment this weekend. One is a kind of a look at 5 classic horror films, which I have to admit was very difficult to do. It's hard to narrow it down to just 5 classics, because I could probably do 10, but 5 was pretty difficult. And then I also have a separate story about 5 obscure, kind of off the beaten path kind of horror films. And this is cold turkey, right? So a lot of people, we didn't, there's been a little conversation beforehand, but they don't really know my list. They saw the list today, So this conversation that we're having is, it is open to interpretation. That's the beauty of this kind of conversation, right? That I don't expect that we're all going to. I don't expect that we're all going to have a favorite. That my favorite may be different than Michelle's, and Michelle's may be different than Mark's, and that's okay. I welcome the feedback, and so I wanted to start. I wanted to kind of segue the conversation that way first by going into a little bit the movies that I've selected here, and then we can kind of break them down. So I guess I went chronologically in order of release date, because I just thought, otherwise then you have to get into a ranking. It's very hard to, everybody knows.
It's so different for everybody. You can't.
Right. I even before I got in here, our news director, she asked me, what's your favorite horror movie? I was like, see, favorite horror movie, and it's and it also depends on on Halloween. I like to watch Halloween.
Yeah.
But I may feel I got a hankering for The Shining right now,
right.
So
or Friday the 13th, on Friday the 13th, you got to watch Jason.
Absolutely, exactly. So I thought I would start by just kind of talking a little bit about some of these movies, and I might go ahead and share a screen here so I can go over. Let's see, I gotta pull this up.
And I'm loving all the comments, by the way. If The Hills Have eyes, terrifying. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. That is a good one here. Let me.
It was a good one too.
I have so many tabs open, I lose track of which one I'm pulling up. Yeah, so I wanted to start with the classics, and let's start with where did my other tab go? Let's refresh the page here to the top. Let's go with at the very top of the list, and you guys can start talking about it while I pull this up. But 1973, there was a movie called The Exorcist, and it is terrifying. I think, and we were just talking about this a second ago, to me, I think it is bar none, the most frightening film I think I've ever seen.
Is that the first Exorcist? You know how sometimes these movies come out and they come out in a different order, but like you have it came out and then the actual order of the series. The Exorcist 1973 was the first one, right?
That is correct. That's the original. That's the golden child, if you will.
That's the one I've seen then.
That's my favorite scary. Well, it's not my favorite. It's my scariest, right? It's the scariest movie that I've ever seen, and I think the reason that is because it's like it seems so real, right? You know, it's
I thought it was because of the projectile vomiting. So
yeah, like I mean, you know, it could happen, you know, like, and it has happened, you know, to people, which is, I mean, the basis of the novel, which was then adapted into a movie, was, you know, a real life exorcism case. And so that was William Peter Blatty, who wrote the novel, and then the great director William Friedkin.
Is that the one? And I mixed the Exorcism movies up. I mean, I imagine they all have the scene of coming down the stairs like backwards, like.
Yeah, funny. Actually, funny you mention it, and I can't show it because of the nature of it, and you know, and then we have like rights restrictions and stuff. But I actually wrote about that. That, you know, there's the one scene or it was the director's cut. So I was not alive. I was born in 1980. So I missed a lot of the movies in theaters that are on my list. But there was one in particular, one scene, and I talked about it right here, that they excised from the original version just too much, you know? I mean, there's a lot in that movie. But that was one that was just like too much, you know? And so in 2000, they had a director's cut version of this movie. And I actually went to the theaters and I saw it, and they reinserted that scene, and it was freaky. You know, it's like, so that's like, so yeah, you're right and wrong both, because it is from the original movie, but they reinserted that scene. They filmed it, discarded it, brought it back in 2000 when they re-released it. But it was great because someone of my generation got to see that movie for the first time, you know, on the big screen, which is that communal experience of being scared with, you know, hundreds of people in a theater at the same time, which we haven't had a lot of recently with the pandemic and all. But that, you know, there's something to be said about that, man.
I have to say, there's also something to be said about Halloween movies that are, like you said, something that actually could happen. Like, people talk about possession in the spirit world and everything else, versus like a serial killer, like, you know, obviously Michael Myers. Like, you know, when you look at things like this, I feel like almost those Conjuring movies and The Exorcist are a little bit more scary, because you're like, wait, could this actually happen?
Yeah. Well, when that movie came out, they had a lot of protests. There were protests in England. There are people here that thought, because at that time they didn't have an NC-17 rating. There are people who wanted it rated X, which was the you know, porn territory, because they didn't want kids to see it. So there were a lot of people quite upset about, you know, the violence in there, how they used a crucifix, and the projectile vomiting, the head spinning, the elevating bed. But one of the interesting things about that movie is the casting, because I think we all remember Ellen Burstyn as the mother, as Reagan's mom. But the actresses that turned down the film, Audrey Hepburn wanted to do it, but she would only do it if they filmed it in Rome, where she was living, so she backed out. Anne Bancroft wanted to do it from The Graduate, but she couldn't do it because she was pregnant and they couldn't wait that long. Jane Fonda turned it down because she thought it was just capitalistic ripoff, she said. So that's how Ellen Burstyn got the role.
That's interesting. We and I know you have actually done some interviews in the course of your distinguished career being out there. You've had the chance to probably meet a lot of these folks. I know you did an interview, right, with Owen Burstyn. What year was that?
It was in the I think mid '90s for a movie called The Roommates or Roommates, and I asked her because in that movie, as you remember, there's an elevating bed. There's the scene where they freeze the bedroom of the daughter, so you can see her breath. But I asked her about the technical challenges for that film.
Well, let's play the clip.
When you think back of technically challenging films you've done, where does The Exorcist rate?
At the top of the list. Yeah, I don't think technically there was anything more difficult. Maybe for ever for anybody. I mean, it was a really very difficult film.
What kind of things did you go through shooting that movie? I know did a lot of freezing. Was it a lot of cold temperatures?
Yes, they froze the set so that our breath vaporized when we spoke, and that was very difficult because they hadn't counted on the camera freezing too. So the camera had to be taken in and thawed out every few minutes, and so it was very difficult to get the scene rolling because we kept losing the camera. So there were a lot of special effects in that were hard to accomplish. One scene I know, the scene where the whole bed is bouncing, where I run up the stairs. We shot that scene and Billy Friedkin wasn't happy with it, and it was rescheduled, and we shot it again and he wasn't happy with it. We ended up shooting it 5 different times. I mean, and it was on the shooting schedule every day for the whole run of the film because we just kept on redoing it till he got it the way he liked it.
So that's an interesting glimpse into the making of that movie. Like how she said how they kept it cold, you know.
Yeah.
I just imagine like even a role like that like changes you as an actor, right? I mean, like the things that you're acting out and pretending are real. It's just like I would have nightmares when I came home from work if that was my job.
And whenever I still to this day when I hear the tubular bells, that infamous theme from The Exorcist, I get a chill down my spine when I hear that.
That's cool. Thank you, Andy. Yeah, I know it is. I didn't know that particular. So I mean, I knew that was actually isn't that what kind of adds to the lore of scary movies too? When they have incidents in the making of the movie, like Poltergeist comes to mind to me. Like who's the actress who was killed in the making of the movie, and you've had that Poltergeist curse. You know, Carrie Ann, she wound up dying right before the making of Part 3. So, you know, there are those movies that kind of carry that ooh, you know, little extra air of mystery. So that's oh, my background went out. I had an awesome Michael Myers. No, I know that's definitely cool. So I you know, I could spend like 8 hours talking about just one movie, but I know we have to keep it moving along, and I'm sure other people want to talk about other movies. So another movie that I had on my top 5 was, and again, sequential order, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the next year, 1974. Michelle, have you seen the movie?
I've seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'm not sure if I've seen the 1974 version. I've probably seen the remake of that. But I mean, every one of those is terrifying. Like it's just so creepy to me because I feel like this is in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I feel like all of these movies, like Jeepers Creepers, all those movies when it's in the middle of nowhere and like this stuff happens and you can't get anywhere. I think that's terrifying alone. It gives you anxiety the entire time you're watching the movie.
Yeah. That's our man Leatherface, who is the central character. Well, he kind of really took on the as the series progressed, as they made more and more of these Texas Chainsaw movies. Leatherface kind of took over as the central character. But you know, he was really just kind of the muscle for the family, really, in the original movie. If you think about it, he was just the guy who was doing the dirty deeds for his cannibalistic family. And then he really kind of took off in a life of its own by like the third or fourth sequel, I think it was like, Leatherface would wind up in the title, and it's kind of it kind of just showed how he was a character that everybody identified with. Which is one of the great talking about identifying with bad people, or
Yeah, when you said identify with, I'm like, in what sense there, Peter?
yeah. Well, now I will say, I mean, that was something that was actually something that I really thought that Alfred Hitchcock did very well in Psycho, which is kind of which was inspired by the Ed Gein story, and Ed Gein was a real life guy in Wisconsin, I think, and like dug up graves and made little trophies of the bones and skin and all that stuff. And so it was the inspiration for Psycho, but that was something that I thought Alfred Hitchcock did very well, and I really wanted to put it on the list too. I couldn't put it past some of the other classics that I had in mind. But it's certainly a classic, and is deserving of being in anybody's top 5 list.
It's almost like you can almost like gain some empathy for some of these bad characters like throughout. I mean, obviously Michael Myers, like you see how many kids dress up like Michael Myers every year. Like you gain some empathy for these characters, and they just like, even though they're the villains, they're kind of like cool characters,
I always wonder about the actors who play like Leatherface and Mike Myers. At lunchtime on the set, do they eat by themselves in the craft services table, or are they by themselves, or what? I always wondered that. So
they're like the most popular ones on set, I'm sure.
That's that's a good point. It's got to be difficult to eat lunch while you're looking at Leatherface. I always thought, and I talk about it in my story, but the end scene, I thought, I actually think, and again, you can read all this on WPTV.com, but I think it's the best introduction and conclusion of a character in a horror film to date. Because the very first scene, if you guys think back to, and I wish I could show a lot of this stuff, we just are somewhat limited by what we can and can't show. But it's out there in the stratosphere for everybody to watch. But there's that great introduction of the character when the guy is, hanging outside the doorstep, and he comes in because he hears like a squealing pig, and he, races, into the house and kind of trips. And there's this room with all this, dead animal carcasses and stuff hanging on the wall, and then Leatherface just clocks him, and it's like and he doesn't say a word, and it's just brutish and terrifying. And then likewise, how they close out that film is, and this little clip that you can see on WPTV.com can show you, there's the end where he's just, the damsel in distress gets away, right? And he's swinging the chainsaw around, thrashing it into the air. And it's like, and I wrote this, it's a bleak ending. The damsel in distress gets away, but the monster is still there. Like, it's kind of one of those, and those are kind of that to me kind of is one of the, we talked about, what makes a horror movie a classic. I think one of the defining characteristics is when you don't feel completely comfortable at the end of the movie, when you're like, so this woman will probably be traumatized for life, and this dude who eats people and clobbers people and cooks them up for his family is still out there roaming the earth.
Right.
And of
There's
course,
no resolution. It's almost like you're right back where you started.
Right, absolutely.
All the trauma is there after watching the whole film.
Yeah, so I don't know. I know we're only 2 in, but do you? I'm
curious to know what our viewers here on the stream think makes a horror movie a classic. Like, what is it about the plot, or what is it about the movie? Like, do you like those movies where at the end you're like, they kill him, but is he really dead? Or like, is it obvious that there's going to be a sequel? I mean, I'm just curious about what makes everyone, like horror movies and think that they're think a horror movie is a classic.
I think that's a great question. Right. Absolutely. I know that's to me, that's one of the things where I'm left uneasy at the end of it. And, movies that make you think, people, and this is kind of like, I stand up for a lot of horror movies because we talk, and Mark, I know you're not like a big movie, horror movie buff, but like Michelle and myself, but I stand up, I defend you because, I hate horror movies. It's just violent. I was like, but they're not. Like, there's some that are very not that violent, not that gory, but yet absolutely terrifying movies out there. But I think one of the telltale signs of what makes a movie a classic, right, a horror classic, is when you're thinking about it. Like, people don't, like, you think, horror movie, it's B rated, it's B, it's schlock horror. It's not really, when you leave Schindler's List and you think about it, what does it mean to you? What does that movie mean to you? Well, I walk away from a movie like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and I say, what does that mean for me? I'm thinking about it. That's what I think.
Andy just wrote a comment: when the unexpected happens and you're left speechless because it wasn't predictable. It's true. There's a lot of times where like you just were not expecting that ending. That's a really good observation.
It's a great point. I like your take there, Andy.
And one of the big tributes.
Go for it.
Yeah, one of the big tributes for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the Geico commercial that's been running for the last year, where all the teenagers are saying, "Let's hide behind the chainsaws." It's so that all these decades later and still calling back to that movie.
Adrian says that's the same way I feel. When they can actually happen, that is the scariest. And my husband is like a testament to that. Like, we'll watch like any psycho thriller movie, any serial killer stuff, and we're fine with it. I put on The Conjuring for him, and he's like, "We're not watching that at night." He's like, "This could actually happen."
So I'm an old soul, right? So I watch a lot of these older men. I kind of poo-poo a lot of the modern movies, but I will say there have been a handful of modern ones that I was like have really wowed me. And I saw the first Conjuring. I was pretty scared. Like, I'm always skeptical of sometimes. It's been a thing in horror movies where they kind of tame it down a little bit. They do these PG-13 horror movies, and I'm like, it can't be that good if it's PG-13. It's like, I don't know. But I will say The Conjuring really got me. So another movie that I think we can all agree is a classic, and it's in the name, right? Is Halloween. Halloween is another one of those movies that I think just everybody everybody knows it now. Everybody knows that eerie theme. Everybody, it's awesome. John Carpenter did it all. John Carpenter's the man. I love him to death. And I had a hard time. There's a movie that did not make the cut because I thought, well, if I put two Carpenter movies in, but The Thing, and I'll kind of talk about it with the next movie that I'll bring up. But I said, well, I got to do Halloween. Like, this is one movie that I watch every Halloween, on Halloween night I watch, and usually you can't help but have to watch it. Like, if you're watching AMC, it's on TV all the time. Like, they run through them. Although it's annoying. I get annoyed. AMC, hey, AMC folks, if you're listening to me, could you do it in sequential order, please?
Yes.
Like it's so annoying when, Halloween 2, and then we do Halloween 3. And then we go and do Halloween H2O. And then we go back to Halloween 4. I was like, no. I was like, do it in order. You have the catalog, clearly. Why don't you just do it in order? But
and since you're on that topic, can we just address the remakes of these Halloween movies? Like, can we just address this? Because I am so confused. Is Laurie Strode Michael Myers' sister or his babysitter? Like, which one is it? Because I can't go back and forth with these plots. I see the movie and I'm like, okay, well, she's his sister to me. Okay, no, she's the babysitter. What was it?
So in the Halloween Kills, the movie that just came out last weekend or whatever, which is the sequel to Halloween 2018, which this is another thing in horror that I'm starting to get annoyed with, when they name the movie the exact same as the original, and then you have to kind of clarify now, say, I'm talking about 1978, I'm not talking about 2018, so I feel like that's kind of annoying to me. I was like, just name it something else, just Halloween, whatever, Halloween, squared. So Halloween 2018, it basically asks you to forget Halloween 2 through whatever they went through, and disregard those, and just assume that it left off where we saw the end of Halloween, which is when Michael Myers, he falls, he gets shot by Loomis a bunch of times, falls off the balcony and lands there, and then Loomis leans over, and he's not there anymore, and he's gone. Okay, it assumes you to pick up from that. So Halloween Kills is obviously the continuation to this. So based on that analysis, we know that the introduction of Laurie Strode as Michael Myers' sister isn't introduced until Halloween 2. Therefore, I'm of the belief that Laurie Strode is not a member of the Michael Myers family. And if that is the case, then why? Then why? Like the premise. I liked the premise of the Halloween movies, and Michelle and I talked about this the other day. I didn't really like Halloween Kills. Full disclosure, didn't like Halloween Kills. I didn't think it was that good. I watched it, and I'll watch the next one because I'm that guy who will watch a movie even when I know that it's probably not going to be good, and I'm going to be that sucker. But I did it, and I'll do it again. But I thought Halloween Kills, basically, it kind of took elements of 2. It actually took clips from Halloween 2 and inserted it into Halloween Kills in flashback sequences. I like how they brought back a lot of those characters, the Tommy Doyle and Lindsay, the kids that he was babysitting, who are now all grown up. Which, by the way, Kylie Jenner, she's like a housewife. I didn't even realize she's one of the housewives of Beverly Hills or whatever, but I digress. I was like, but it's the original actress. It was like, little Lindsay grew up to be a housewife. Anyway, but yeah, I just think that Halloween Kills didn't really give it's what makes the first one so great, and why the other kind of pales in comparison, because it took elements of 2. You had Laurie in the hospital. She was basically relegated to a hospital bed, which was kind of like Halloween 2. So they kind of allude to Halloween 2, but they want you to forget it. But you, as an audience and a loyal Halloween watcher, you're like, but I can't forget it because I know. And so, of course, there's shades of, so then what's his obsession? Like, why doesn't he just move on, but he does kind of, I guess actually, when I think about it, he really doesn't have any contact with her. It's her family members, who are going out there, and this angry mob of people going after Michael Myers. I don't know. You guys talk, because I know I've been talking a lot.
Well, it's amazing how long the Jamie Lee Curtis has been able to ride that Halloween wave, because back in 78, she was only 19 years old. And the producers didn't want to hire her because they really didn't know who she was. She's only in a TV series that was on at the time. But then they found out that she was the daughter of Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis. And they thought, well, this would be great PR for the film. But she was only paid $8,000 for that movie. So the director, John Carpenter, he wanted final cut. So he took all kinds of pay cuts. So he did the music, co-wrote the script with Deborah Hill, and directed, and he got paid $10,000 in order to get final cut of the movie. But that first film was only $300,000 budget, and actually back in I think it was 98 when Halloween H2O came out. Actually, the title was, I was on the press junket for that. It was called Halloween H20, but the way the logo looked, everyone started calling it Halloween H2O, and the studio people were all upset. No, it's Halloween H20, but they finally gave up. But I did interview Jamie Lee Curtis, and we have a clip of that, and I asked her about how low the budget was on the first film, and she told a little story about that.
The first Halloween film,
$300,000, 21 days.
Well, what kind of corners do they have to cut?
There were no corners to cut. The amusing thing about Halloween, the best story about the budget, is that in the movie, the old scary house is exactly how that house really looks in Pasadena. And we shot all of the post-opening scene stuff at that house. The last shot of the movie, the entire crew and cast went to that old house and rebuilt it to look like the new house in the opening scene. So we spent the day whitewashing it, putting up wallpaper, curtains, furniture, and then for that whole opening shot, which is famous, this all-in-one opening shot, they didn't have enough lights to light the whole house. So what had to happen is there are grip and electric guys standing in corners with lights, and as the camera moved by and started going up the stairs, they ran into the next room and lit the corner of the room, so when the camera came back down the stairs, that room was lit. That's how the corners were cut. Absolutely true.
It's fun. Yeah, it's funny because she did a whole bunch of horror films after that, and she got the title Scream Queen, and she hated it, and she washed her hands of everything. But now, as a producer and everything, she has fully embraced it again. So,
can I just say, I love what they did with her character with Michael Myers. she and Peter, we were just talking about this the other day. It was like victim turns warrior, hunting the hunter. And I love what they did, and that's why I really like Halloween, the 2018. Way more than Halloween Kills. I feel like she was kind of hopeless and helpless in this movie. I don't know why they didn't really incorporate her more in the last Halloween. And we were talking about how, she you're right. She became this loony character that everyone's like, oh, she's crazy. She thinks Michael Myers is coming back. To now the entire town in Halloween Kills is it's a mob. We're all going after Michael Myers. We're not letting them get Laurie. And it's wait a second, you thought she was crazy before.
Yeah, and you had the two kids who also survived the attack from 1978, and then they're all grown up. And they're also now, I know there's been a passage of time, but still, I feel like you would remember the physical attributes of your attacker. Yes. And even though he was behind a mask, like the guy that they were chasing in Halloween Kills, I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen it, but I don't think the guy he's not anywhere. He doesn't match. I would have been if I were Tommy Doyle, played by Anthony Michael Hall now. I would have been sorry guys, this is not the guy we're looking for. This is totally not the right guy. Okay, well, in the spirit of time, and I'll keep this moving along. The other classic that I had from the same year was a little movie called Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And this is a remake. I think this is this and the John Carpenter remake of The Thing, which I didn't include on my list just because I had already had Halloween, but it would be in my top 10. This and The Thing are the two greatest paranoia movies, paranoia horror, I call it. It's my own name for it. But it's, I mean, it's a better sequel, or it's a better remake. That I think it's better than the original, and it has, it calls on, it has a lot of shades of the original in it, but it takes you out of the small town California and puts you in big town, big city in San Francisco. So it's a great setting for the movie. And it's right in that kind of the end of the flower power era. And Haight-Ashbury and that place was ground central for that stuff. But there's basically what would you do? If you're becoming a pod person, it's assimilation, right? It's a story about assimilation. I mean, well, it's a lot of things, but on the horrific front, it's a story about, we don't want to lose our humanity, right? we don't want to lose who we are. And these pod people, they come to Earth and they quietly, they get you while you're sleeping, and then they take you over, and then they're just going to live your lives. Only there's going to be no love. There's going to be no, scare, fear. They're probably not watching horror movies. These pod people, they go to work, they type, and you see it. It's like really, I mean, it's freaky. I think, I don't know, Michelle, if you've seen it.
I haven't seen it, no, but it reminds me of, like, I can't think of the name now. It's pretty recent, in the last 10 years. The Parasite movie that also takes over people, like the parasite gets in you. It's kind of like an alien thing too, but you become like, it's still you, but you become a different person. I can't remember now the name of the movie. But that's kind of like the same plot style that movie reminds me of.
Yeah. It also has one of the best all-time cameos. I think you have a freeze frame there with Kevin McCarthy, who was in the original film. He gets a call back out. You see him running into the windshield to warn that about the pod people. So that was a great cameo for him to do.
It's a great moment, right? I know, because it calls him, like, if you've seen the original 1956 version, like near the end of the movie, he's on the street, they're coming, you're next, and so you had the central character of the original and then the central character of the remake, and they meet in this one little bit scene, but it's like, so it's a great, like, nod to the original. And the casting is fantastic. Lots of people who would go on to be in things, and I wrote about it. Jeff Goldblum was later in The Fly, Veronica Cartwright, who was later in Alien, and then of course the best piece of casting was Leonard Nimoy. Like, up to that point, he was kind of everybody. You're Dr. Spock. That's all you are. And this was, I think this was a year before Star Trek: The Motion Picture came out. So and he was going to get back into that Spock role again. So, like, this was a really I got to see more and Spock, kind of like pod people, right? Like Spock, who's like, the Vulcan, you don't have any emotion, like, it's not logical and everything. So you've got he plays the psychiatrist, and, he's basically talking people out of, you think that this person that you're sleeping with is a pod person, but he's not really a pod person. It's just, isn't it because you're struggling in your marriage? It's what you want. It's what you envision in your head, but he's not really. But actually, yes, he really is a pod person. Like, so. That movie terrifies me, and I talk about this. The final scene. The final scene is also terrifying. It's and I don't want to give it. I mean, I kind of give it away. I'm sorry, Michelle. But I feel like it's been out since 1978, so I feel like spoilers are up there. But like, when you watch the totality of the movie, and you'll see it's really quite awesome.
Don't judge me for this either, but I've never seen The Shining, and I know I have to watch it. I know it's a classic. My husband always can't believe, he's like, have you read The Shining? I'm like, I've never read it. I've never seen it. I have to do it. I know I feel like I'm ruining my Halloween credibility here.
Yeah. So The Shining is the last one on my top 5 list. And that's probably my favorite. That's probably my favorite horror movie. And the reason why I think that is because, it's not my scariest, but it's my favorite. But it's because, Stanley Kubrick is my guy. Like, everyone says, oh, like, I was always into movies. So like, oh, you want to be like Steven Spielberg when you grow up? I was like, no, I want to be like Stanley Kubrick. I was like, that's who I hope to be. Like, Kubrick, did it all, did a lot, he was a writer, he was a director, he was a cinematographer. He had an eye. He was groundbreaking every movie that he made. And he touched every genre, including, it's like, he's like, hey, after Barry Lyndon, I do this great period piece. I think I want to dabble into horror. Let's get into the horror genre. So, he did The Shining, and The Shining, I think it's his masterpiece, in my humble opinion. And I think it's this is where I say, like, this movie is where horror movies are not just movies, it's cinema,
right.
It's it's more than just horror. It's cinema. It's thoughtful. And Michelle, you have to watch these last two movies.
No, I have to. Everybody talks about The Shining. I mean, there are movies that talk about The Shining. So I'm like, I have to watch. I don't know what I've been waiting for. And you were born in 1980, right, Peter?
I was.
So do you remember this movie? I saw it as a kid, and I can't remember many parts of it, but this is where my fear of, like, forget it. Okay, forget it. This is where the fear of clowns scared the life out of me. Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I definitely remember that one. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of schlocky, kind of silly, but I definitely remember it,
It's funny because everyone remembers how great Jack Nicholson is in that film, but the people they looked at for casting, Robin Williams, who was doing Mork and Mindy at the time, was actually considered for that.
I can't picture Robin Williams doing a movie like that.
Well, he did the 1 hour photo, so he can do scary stuff. But at that time, Harrison Ford, Robert De Niro were all considered.
Wow.
And Stephen King, who wrote the book, he wanted Martin Sheen or someone like John Voight, but they said no, we want Jack Nicholson. And of course, that iconic scene when he comes in with the axe and he's breaking through the door with the axe and he yells, "Here's Johnny!" And that line was improvised, and Stanley Kubrick, who did not know who Johnny Carson was, wasn't familiar with the interest, so they almost left that scene out and said, "No, this is a great shot." Another little factoid was, I didn't know this. Jack Nicholson actually in the California Air National Guard was a firefighter. So when they did the scene with the door and the axe, they wanted, he doesn't have any experience with axes. We'll have a fake door that's easy to break through. He just smashed it through. So they wound up using a real door because he had that firefighting experience with the axe, so he could do the thing.
I really thought the Shining was a great example of that, and that scene that you're talking about that everybody kind of knows by now. And I think even Michelle she's probably seen that scene, even though they haven't seen the movie. Like everybody knows the scene. I've heard of it. Like that's one of the, it's when like it's got a cultural, it's like when art imitates life, imitates art again, so, and then and now like people associate "Here's Johnny" with this movie and not Johnny Carson, which before this movie, it was Johnny Carson's thing. Jack Nicholson totally stole his thunder. It is now Jack Nicholson's thing, and forever, to the end of time, will be Jack Nicholson's thing. And it's terrifying as this little poster shot here, Mark, with some nice movie poster artwork for us.
Jack Nicholson can be really creepy in his roles. I could totally picture him in that movie. I gotta see it.
And Stephen King, didn't like the movie, because it was so different than the book. And I wrote about that. It's very different than the book, and it's supposed to be like like Kubrick made it his own thing, and I'm okay with that. I think the book is great in its own right. It's one of those you're afraid to turn the page. The movie deals with different kind of topics. King was dealing with alcoholism, and it was all about overcoming alcoholism, and there it just kind of hints at it in The Shining, but Kubrick deals with more like everything, every shot, every scene, everything in the background. Like I took a bunch of film studies classes, shocker, when I was in college, and and we dissected. I chose to dissect The Shining, and I did all this. I broke down every little scene, and even the tilting and the bookshelf, and there's this one scene at the beginning of the movie where the books are tilted one way and then they're tilted the other, and this is before they've even gotten to the Overlook Hotel, and Shelley Duvall's cigarettes growing longer and longer and longer, and everybody said say, oh, like it was a film flub for Kubrick does not have film flubs. I was like, it was deliberate, it was intentional, and it was meant to show the imbalance in the relationship of the family structure. And that is why the books were imbalanced. And so the books tilt one way and then they tilt the other because it's an imbalanced relationship. And like even it's like, oh my God, nobody breaks down the books in the background of a scene that was really didn't have much to do with the majority of the movie, but that's the kind of guy that I am. And that was and I thought it was like totally Kubrickian through and through, so
the one scene that stays with me from that film, besides the elevator doors opening and all the blood coming down the hallway, which they use in the initial trailer, is the young son driving on his tricycle through the empty hallways of the hotel and just going around corners and corners. And they were using the Steadicam, which was fairly new at that time. And he sees these ghosts of two little girls, twins, at the end of the hallway, and they ask, "Come play with us, Danny." And I had chills on that scene.
When they put kids in movies as like creepy characters or ghosts or something, that is terrifying every time, every single time.
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
That was great. I'm actually I'll pull this full so you can see. I'm actually wearing. I'll drop the banner for a second so you can see. I'm actually wearing this is my ode to The Shining. It's a video game style.
Nice.
And you have the options, play with us forever and ever, into room 237, keep pedaling. That's like that. I busted. This is a seasonal shirt for me. But here we are. I'm bringing it out. So
what is everyone else's like top, scary movies? I'm curious on the comments, like what people bring up. I feel like there's always a movie that you didn't think about and you're like, oh my gosh, yes, like that's a great movie. For me, like I mean, the classics for me, and of course I'm going to age myself, as far as like how young I am. The Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street, all the Freddy Krueger movies as a kid terrified me. Child's Play, and some of the remakes have gotten really cheesy and corny, like some of the sequels from Child's Play, of course. I feel like they've lost Chucky's fear and they've just made him like this really funny character. But I mean, like those are top ones for me. Of course, and I already mentioned all the scary spiritual stuff, when it comes to The Exorcist. I actually really like The Exorcism of Emily Rose. I like that.
I didn't see that one.
You haven't seen that one? I liked it a lot because they kind of the movie is kind of set with a trial, the trial of her exorcism and her dad, and it's just like, and that made it so much more interesting to me, like to show like a real life situation and then centering it around this like horrific, tragic, like scary, experience. So that was interesting. But I'm curious what everyone else's top movies are.
What
about you?
I really liked the Blair Witch Project because I saw it when it came out, and that was before people knew. There was all this speculation. It was part of the ad campaign that it was a real like a documentary. This was real found footage, and I remember, and it hadn't come out that these were actors yet, and I had to see a sneak preview of the film, and I saw it at 11 o'clock at night at a movie theater in the city I was living in, and I was the only person in the theater. This big giant theater. I was halfway down, so I'm watching the movie. It's drawing me in, and all of a sudden I notice, I feel someone's behind me, and I turn around, and way up on the aisle by the doors leading into the theater, there's a silhouetted figure standing there. I go, well, that's weird. So I turn back, and 10 seconds later, I look back, and the guy has come now half the distance towards me and is still standing there. I go, this is really weird. I look back at the screen, I turn back, and he's disappeared. And so the whole rest of the movie, I'm terrified this guy's going to pop out somewhere. And between that and the film, I was terrified.
Yeah, Blair Witch Project is a good one.
I saw it in the theaters when I saw it before, and that was actually it was a Florida UCF. That was the big movie that kind of put UCF on the map. UCF Film School.
What's interesting I find about a lot of these horror movies that like there's such, like you mentioned, there's iconic scenes in each one that end up either like remakes in other movies, or like they're playing it on TV in another movie, like that happens to be the movie they're playing on TV, or like when they make these parodies, like Scary Movie, like, and they have the Blair Witch, like when all the snot's falling on the camera and the camera's looking right up the nose, and that's in the Scary Movie scene too. Like, I think it's really great when you see them act out like parodies of the scary movies.
Yeah. So we're getting on the hour mark, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but I would like to at least touch on briefly some of, we talked about the classics, and there's a lot of classics, but I listed 5 in a separate story that you can see on WPTV.com. I have 5 movies that I really think you should watch if you've never had the chance to see it. And again, in chronological order, beginning with Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. And this is, if you're Michelle, I know you're a Miami gal.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
This was, it's very campy. I write about that. It's, it is not, it's the kind of, it's a zombie movie where like, it's that really red blood, like fake red, like too red, doesn't look real kind of blood, almost like pinkish hue blood. But the end scene, and I write about this, the end scene is really classic. Where they get on the boat that the folks came to this island off of Biscayne Bay, and they get on the boat, and you just see them, the boat's kind of sailing towards Miami. I'm just like, that is awesome. Like the implication of that, is awesome.
That's great to see that.
So yeah, that's one movie, and that, so I kind of check the zombie genre with that. I mean, Night of the Living Dead would have been in my top 10.
What about Pet Sematary? That was a really
actually. It's funny that you say that. Pet Sematary is actually one of the most terrifying movies that I ever saw. So my parents were always very cool, and I got to see a lot of scary movies, and I think that's what shaped me. I was the HBO kid. I grew up with HBO. I know I was very privileged. So I watched a lot of movies, and my mom, it came out in 1989, I think, and I went with my parents to see it, or I went with my mom because my mom was also into horror movies. Like, we used to roll out the couch and just like turn the couch into the bed and like camp out and watch scary movies. USA Up All Night with Gilbert Gottfried, and so, but we so we would watch this. So we went and saw Pet Sematary, and I like, my mom had to take me out of the theater. I couldn't. Pet Sematary was really scary. I still get kind of scared by that. That's a good one. That's a good one that I totally neglected, but I think you're right. I don't know if it's like, I wouldn't call it obscure, and it might not be my top 10, but it would definitely be in my top 20, top 25. I think it's it petrified me. This, I was talking about how I was an HBO kid. This movie Vamp, this is totally a product of that. So I had this. I used to, in the VHS days, right? I would take the VHS and I would record movies off HBO or whatever. And so I recorded Vamp, and I would watch it, a lot. My mom, and then I was like waking up in the middle of the night. I was like, I can't sleep, and my mom and dad were like, well, if you can't sleep, we're gonna have to record over that movie. So I had to record over it, like I remember recording over it, but I don't know. This is like getting really old school, right? But like, you remember when you would take like a VHS, like you could, to extend the tape life, like if it was like only like 2 hours, but you want to make it 6 hours, like extended play, you can manipulate the tape, like put a piece of Scotch tape or something over the little, or break off the little black. I wish I had a VHS tape to show, like, and you could extend it. So we would record things on it and make it last longer, whatever. So I had to record I remember we recorded The Wizard of Oz over Vamp. But then there was like a scene where it was like before we had the next thing. It was after The Wizard of Oz, because Vamp was recorded on the slow play, so it like took up the whole tape. And so there was a part where it, like, the fuzz goes away, and then there's like 1 minute of Vamp, and then it fuzzes away again, and then the next movie came up. Like, I remember I would go back and watch that like 1 minute when I was a kid. That was something I did. That Vamp freaked me out. I mean, well, like Grace Jones is a vampire, and Michelle Pfeiffer's younger sister, who I think she was my first celebrity crush. Not Michelle Pfeiffer, Dee Dee Pfeiffer.
Yeah.
Better looking than her sister. That's all I'm gonna say. It's a hot take, people. Dee Dee Pfeiffer is better looking than Michelle Pfeiffer. At least she was in 1986. That was my thought. I was like, yeah, get the gal. It's like, yeah, she was impressive. But yeah, that movie. Grace Jones is just kind of creepy looking. All due respect to Grace Jones, but she's just kind of creepy looking. So it's like I don't expect, like, I know we didn't talk about these movies, but I don't expect that any of you have seen these movies. And that's why I'm bringing it up, because I'm like, these are movies that I say, if you have the chance, you should.
Yeah.
And I also talked about this movie. This is where I actually went a little more modern, like, because I can't put them classics because they're not old enough in my opinion. But Wolf Creek, I actually really liked. I don't know if it was like an Australian horror. I've just never seen an Australian horror before, and I thought it was, he was just kind of a weird dude, he was likable but distrusting, and you realize by the end of it, yeah, you were right to think that. And the characters were even kind of like, yeah, I don't know if I trust him, but he's our best option. And then it's like, sometimes your best option is just to wait for the next option as opposed to wait for the best option, because the best option could be a homicidal maniac, So
I never saw Wolf Creek. Andy commented about the Saw sequels. We totally forgot to talk about the Saw sequels. Like, I mean, those are classics too.
That's a good point. Yeah, that is actually, I call it, it's kind of like body horror, right? And that's that. I'll go back to what we said about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Texas Chainsaw Massacre really was the first movie to incorporate machinery. Stuff that you get at Home Depot suddenly can be used as murder weapons. I've got a great idea. I'm going to take this chainsaw and I'm going to split a person in half with it, or I'm going to get this hatchet and I'm going to bash it into their skull, like that. That's that. So like, but Saw is kind of, Saw, I like the first one. I was actually kind of intrigued by this new one with Chris Rock. It's like Spiral from the Book of Saw, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen the new one yet either, but I like the Saw sequels. I think they're entertaining and creepy, extremely creepy.
Yeah, I just thought it I don't know, it became old hat after a while for me, but I definitely liked the first one. And and like the thought of like, I have to saw off my arm, like, in order to save my life, like that's always kind of
I think it's a surprise for each one, like each game, that you have to complete this task. Is he going to do it or not? I think that's the intrigue about it.
That yeah, you're right. That's true. No, I definitely like them. At least the first one. I didn't watch all of the sequels. Another really obscure movie that I wanted to bring up was Bone Tomahawk. It was like, I just totally, this is one that I randomly saw on TV. I was just flipping through and it popped up as a suggested. I was like, Kurt Russell in a horror movie? It's a horror Western. Like, again, it's kind of different, It's like, I was like, oh, I'm intrigued because it's different, it's not one of those same old kind of horror tropes, and it's really kind of freaky. I was like, I was, disturbing, and I like Kurt Russell. He's the man. So that's a good one, and it's relatively modern. A couple years ago, 2015. Bone Tomahawk, I kind of recommend it. I think you can get it on demand probably, and that's where I saw it, like on accident one night, because I have 2 young kids, so we put the kids to bed, and then my wife doesn't participate in horror movie watching with me, so like it's the after midnight, like I'm watching movies up after, these are the kind of movies I'm watching, this kind of stuff, and that's where you discover things like Bone Tomahawk, or the next one called The Rental. Have you seen this? This is from last year. I watched this during pandemic times.
Oh.
Yeah, it was pretty good, and it was directed by Dave Franco. You know, the actor, the comedy guy. You know, he's doing horror. I was like, wow, it's really good. I was like, I thought it was legit. Like I was kind of creepy. You know, it just felt creepy. I walked away thinking, I was like, you know, that's where it got me. Like I was like, movies that I see on TV, like you know, when I go to see a horror movie, I go to the movie theater to see a horror movie. You know, it's like this, I've got to see this movie, or any movie. I say, this is a movie I have to go see. But I went you know, but like I didn't know about the rental. I was like, you know, I want to watch something different. Like I don't feel like there's movies that I can always watch time and time. I'll always watch The Shining when it's on. I'll always watch Halloween when it's on. But you know, I was like, I kind of want to watch something different, you know, and the rental was on, it was available. And so I watched it, and it was really awesome. I really recommend it, you know, if you're in for a good scare.
Haven't seen it. I'll have to watch it. I mean, yeah, my husband and I do the same thing. I mean, there's the movies that you want to go see in the theaters that are the big Halloween movies, the big box movies that you want to see in the theaters. And then there's like just on a Friday night, you're like, let's watch a scary movie. And you go through Netflix or Hulu or, you know, whatever streaming service you're using nowadays and try to find a good scary movie that maybe not a lot of people have heard about.
Yeah, I have two movies to mention that are a little bit more obscure, and I don't know if Peter, if you can show the posters, but the first one is called The Woman in Black. It's a British film from 2012. It was a stage play, a book and a stage play. But Daniel Radcliffe, Harry Potter himself, is in this one. It's a turn of the century England, where this lawyer whose wife has died goes to this creepy old house to finish up some legal stuff, and that movie terrified me. That was excellent. It didn't get much notice here in the States. And then the other film, you mentioned Australian films. If you have the poster coming up, yeah, that's The Woman in Black. I would highly recommend that one. And the other film, you mentioned Australian horror films, is called The Babadook from 2014.
I've seen it.
Yes, yeah, that was
really good.
I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, all those when a kid says there's a monster in the house, that's the movie that says maybe you should listen to him.
Yeah, the boogeyman type deal. Yeah.
Yeah, very well done.
Good.
Yeah, great ending where I don't give it away, but it's pretty terrifying.
It is so scary. I would recommend watching it for sure.
I'll have to put that on my list then, because I have definitely not seen that one. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys have any closing thoughts. I know people have to get on with their lives and day and stuff like that. But you know, this was just, you know, we're always doing news. We're always doing, you know, I personally, you know, I'm doing news all day and I know Michelle, you're always doing, you know, we always do, you know, hard stuff, but this is fun, you know. I was like, and this Facebook is really, you know, a great forum for this, or Meta, whatever we're going to call it now. You know, but I mean, it really, you know, it's like, it just, you know, this is the time of year when, because after this, because starting Monday, it's going to be jingle bells.
I know. I just want to hold on to Halloween season a little bit longer. I love it. You know, I've already watched like Hocus Pocus like 3 times. This is like my season. My whole house has been decorated for Halloween since mid-September. You know, the scary movies, like, you know, the hot chocolate or pumpkin spice or whatever you want to do. You know, we don't have the cold weather yet. Hopefully soon, right? They told us this weekend. So I'm all in. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Mark, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts or any thoughts.
Yeah, there's something. Yeah, there's something cathartic about watching a horror film, especially if you can watch it in a theater, and whenever it's a shared experience. And then at the end, you know, no matter what's happened, you feel safe. But when you go home, you make sure you lock the doors.
Or you don't sleep that night. Sometimes you just toss and turn and don't sleep that night. That's okay.
I agree. Well, listen, I had a fun time talking about this. I could talk about this for another hour or 2 hours. Like, we'd spend all day, but I actually have to go and do some stories. So, you know, so all of our loyal WPTV.com readers can find out what's going on important things in the world and in our community. But anyway, I do appreciate all of your time and the audience. Thanks for listening. I know it's I know it's not for everyone, but I appreciate, I think we had Andy and I know we had Adrienne comments for a little bit, and I know Adrienne. I know she's not a big horror buff, so I appreciate her getting involved in the conversation. And Sandy. So I thanks all you guys who chimed in, and let's do this next year.
Yeah, it was really fun. Everybody have a great, safe and happy Halloween. And yeah, hopefully we'll get to make this an annual thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, take care, everyone. Have a safe and fun Halloween.
All right. Thanks very much. Okay.
Bye.